Thanks for joining us this morning. You are here and you're making a great choice to begin preparing for a wonderful start to an online return to school. I know to some of you that may sound far-fetched, and that's really okay. That's why you're here today. I'm Patricia Stewart-Hopkins, and I am a community advocate. I'm the Regional Director of Development for Mountain Comprehensive Care Center, and I'm also an adjunct professor because teaching is what I love to do. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn and grow with you today. This is one of the best parts of the work that I do. I'm joined today by Maggie Goff, who is a wellness expert. She's there. You can see her, and she will speak a little later in the presentation and may chime in periodically. She's a great complement to what I have to share. And I will also be joined by Bridget Mann. Bridget has 22 years in the education field. She works here in Clark County, and she's the administrative director for Clark County Public Schools, wearing many hats, one of which is a collaboration between the public school system and mental health providers, which is vital to the support and well-being of students. So I just want to thank her publicly for that commitment. She's done a great job working with us over the last 4 years and supporting student wellness by working with all of the community mental health agencies. So some of you join us today and you have opinions that exist kind of on a continuum as related to this online learning experience. Some of you think that this is going to be a disaster and fruitless. Some of you think that this is the best choice to keep your children and community safe. And I would like for people to be open-minded in the conversations that we're having today. We're really here to support you no matter where you fall on that continuum. And I'd also like to start with a reminder that teachers have reached out to me personally to remind everyone that joins us here today that they are there for help. So I know last fall was an emergency response situation and things did not go as we had hoped. Last spring was an emergency response. This fall is something entirely different. People have been working tirelessly within the school districts across the state to prepare for this online learning opportunity, and you will find that it's very different from your experience last spring. We are sharing quite a bit of information, so I think it's important to remind yourself that this is just an introduction and a part of planning. This is the heavy lifting, and then once you get these ideas in place, you'll be better prepared for that online learning experience. As we move forward with online learning, we need to recognize that yes, times are still uncertain and we are still somewhat unfamiliar with the way online learning will flow at home. So that's why you're here. We're going to make a plan today for improved online learning. And that will also improve the well-being of everyone involved. And we're not setting a goal of perfection. We're really setting a goal of accomplishment and celebrating small successes. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good. So Maggie and I also experienced online learning as parents, and we can validate the difficulty that was present. And that's one of the reasons we were inspired to meet with you today, because we really want to validate that experience. There was a steep learning curve for us as parents, juggling teaching, working, and managing COVID-related stressors. There's a lot going on, and we can plan for a better learning experience in the fall. I'd like to remind you of some things that might be happening with your children or teens that are actually normal given the experiences that we've had with some social disconnectedness, and increased stressors. It's normal to be more tearful, more irritable, more tired, and more reactive to things. This is true for people of all ages because the pandemic has turned on our brain's protective alarm response. So once that alarm response gets turned on, we are less prepared to do things like plan, use reason and logic, act our age, etc. And that's true for grown-ups too. So part of what we'll discuss today is how to notice when that alarm response is turned on and turn it off for ourselves and for our children. So I think it's important, again, to acknowledge that even when things run smoothly, there can be behavior problems with our kiddos at home, right? And I think that as we see these behaviors unfold, it's important to know that some of it is really normal, given what they've experienced and observed. And to also remember that their behavior is often a means to get or to avoid something. The thoughts and feelings and behaviors that they are having are related, and they can kind of cycle through. You're probably keenly aware of patterns with your kids and what's behind their behavior. So I just encourage you to think about that and pause and wait before you try to intervene. So we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about how to help our children and teens return to calm so that they can have a better learning experience. One of the ways that we can do that is by kind of pre-planning for triggers that we're aware of. So I know that one of my two children works better without background noise, and the other one really needs background noise, which is a great convenience to me as a parent with a small learning environment. I'm sure some of you can relate. So we have separate study spaces for them because I don't want to trigger an escalated response from my daughter during what is already somewhat difficult for her. So think about what might set your student or child off in that online learning experience and try to plan in advance around that. We'll talk more about that planning in advance in just a few minutes. Once they have been triggered or set off, it becomes pretty obvious what's happened because of the change in their body and the volume of their voice, perhaps, maybe their posture. Maybe they're really seeking your attention in an obvious way. So that is when we have the opportunity to kind of disrupt what's happening and work towards turning off that alarm response that we talked about. In addition to that, we can teach and practice coping strategies with our children and students regularly. So the best way to learn a coping strategy is to learn it when you're not in an alarm response. So I encourage parents and teachers to start the learning day with a calming strategy, one that's a good fit for your child, and we'll talk about a few of those in just a few minutes. I'd like to look at the escalation cycle just for a moment to kind of pinpoint where you can intervene the most successfully. So if we look at that escalation cycle, you can see there are points of intervention, and they fall before the peak on either side. During the peak of that escalation cycle, what we are looking for is connection, not correction. So when our child or our student is in an alarm response and they're kind of freaking out, for lack of a better term, that is when we need to use the stop technique. So S stands for simply stop what it is that you're doing. T stands for take a breath. O stands for observe. During that observation, you're going to try to determine what it is that's needed. It's not always obvious, but we're going to attempt to figure that out during observation. And P stands for proceed. And you're proceeding with a plan, right? Because you've taken the time to stop and breathe and observe to figure out what might be triggering them. So as you finish that stop cycle and prepare yourself to intervene, you are going to intervene with connection in mind so that your child knows this is not a time for consequence or correction. I just want you to know that I'm here and you're safe and I'd like to help. And you can also remind them too that when the teacher is available, they want to help as well. So it's not just you that can offer support. I know for my daughter, if I say I can help you with math, she knows I'm lying, so she needs to be reassured that her teacher will help her later. So thinking about those things, and then also thinking about how if we choose not to intervene when we see the triggers or when they get to that escalation place and they're freaking out, we're likely going to see that pattern repeat. So it's true that our attitude is contagious. That's why having a positive attitude and a plan for online learning is super important this fall. Because if we have a bad attitude and a negative outlook on what this is going to be like, guess what? So will our kids, and then we are going to have a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you're not sure you can muster the fake of, I believe I can achieve this online learning thing, I want you to practice now. Because the better and the more comfortable you feel about it, the more comfortable they will feel about it. And then they will mimic your calm and your flexibility, and they will be better able to learn in this online world. So one of the strategies that we encourage parents and teachers to work on with children and adolescents and for themselves is different kinds of mindfulness practices. So the idea in mindfulness practice is that we prepare now for a return to calm later when it's needed. So that's why we're going to start practicing now with our children. So it's important that in practicing, we try to be really consistent. Think about what practice is calming for your child and make that your go-to. And you can always build on that as you have more time to practice with them. Know that during mindfulness, it's not a time for correction or consequence. It's really a time for connection with your child or student. You want to allow them to be themselves during that space and offer acceptance of what it is that they say can help them return to calm. And also engage in a sense of curiosity and learn more about what it is that helps them return to calm. And some of us aren't necessarily sure what that is for ourselves. So now's a good time to kind of explore what it is that feels good and how that's manageable as you are navigating, working, and supporting online learning. We'll talk more about that soon. So there are a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is just paying attention on purpose in the moment to one thing at a time. I'm going to say that again. Mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in the moment to one thing at a time. When we do that, it turns off our brain's alarm response. And once that response is turned off, we're better able to plan and use logic and reason and learn, right? Which is why we're here today, to promote that learning experience. So, mindful breathing. There are some wonderful YouTube videos on this. There's curriculum available online, and the Clark County School District has several experts in the way of mindfulness practice. So you can reach out to me to get connected to the experts on this. This presentation and these last few slides regarding behavior management during online learning is brought to you by Allison Nelson, and she is one of our local school psychologists. She's a rock star in the world of mindfulness and helping teachers promote that to better regulate students in their class. So very fortunate if you have a connection to Allison Nelson, and if you don't, I can get you connected to even more resources on how to practice mindful breathing, how to use body scan during that mindful breathing practice. When we pay attention to our bodies as we breathe, we might notice areas of tension. For example, right now, along my shoulder blades, I notice that there's some tension. And when I pay attention to that, my body has a natural instinctual response to relax that area of my body. The more relaxed we are, the better able we are to learn. So just kind of process and absorb that. We also want to advocate for mindful movement. Mindfulness is many different things. It's not just breathing. So sometimes mindful movement is jump roping or jumping on the trampoline or bouncing your feet on your chair rail. So be open-minded and work through some different strategies that might be employable during this online learning experience at home. I don't recommend trampoline jumping during online instruction. Sorry, I use that as an example, teachers. If you're listening, that would be a great movement break, though. Also, we want to have positive affirmations kind of tucked in our pocket for when we see our child beginning to struggle. It's important to remind them that they can do hard things, and it's okay to ask for help. So one of the ways we are going to prepare for the fall is by having a family meeting where we can establish some consistency, predictability, and routine. When our children know what's coming next, they don't ask us, and we prefer that because otherwise they will ask us 42 times in the course of an hour. So this is really a way to take some weight off of you later. We want to have a sense of how things are going to happen, what's within our control, how to access supports, and how to reduce the stress load for ourselves during online learning. And Maggie's going to talk about some ways that we can simplify that process in just a few minutes. I'd like you to think about, in this family meeting, who is best suited for specific roles around the house. Earlier, I mentioned that I'm not a math whiz. So in third grade, we decided I was no longer in charge of math support. My husband is in charge of that. My daughter doesn't even ask me for help with math. It's a known fact that Daddy will help her when he gets home. Maybe that's a neighbor or a cousin or a big sister or a big brother. I know all of our families look different. So think about within your family, which is defined by you, who can help with particular areas that you don't feel as confident in, and delegate to your strengths. So I'm joined by many women in this discussion, and so I'd like to just note that traditionally women have had a role where we do the majority of child and home management, and this is a time when we need to let go of some of that where possible, so we can support the success of online learning at home and of our own wellness. Once we create this plan and routine for the family with contribution from our children about what they need during the day, we can consider how each person can support the work of the home based on their strengths. So, for example, there are certain chores in the household that don't require me as an adult to take charge. So my children, who are age 12 and almost 10, are perfectly able to unload and load the dishwasher. I can lighten my load by letting them load and unload. So I'm going to talk about that in the family meeting. This is something I need for you to do so I can have time to help you and also be at work and do what I need to do there. We are trying to get in front of the chaos that will ensue inevitably because that's what life is at times. So we're going to plan for some rules that provide structure during our virtual classroom time. Our teachers are going to love us for this. So it's going to help you, and it's also going to help the other students in the classroom if you have those rules in place. So you're going to talk about rules of online learning with respect to what it is that the teacher has requested during that time as well. I'd like to, Nate, take a moment too and mention that this webinar series, while we do reference Clark County because that is our home base, is really designed for any school district family. So we've invited families from Harrison County and Fayette County and really counties all across the state to join us. So forgive us if we are mentioning solely Clark County. A family meeting is something that can happen in any home. So specific to parent and family meeting time, the district, it doesn't really matter. We're glad you're here so we can help you prepare. So when you're planning for a daily schedule, it's important to recognize preset times that are aligned with what the teacher's expectations are, and consider where there's some flexibility in learning and taking breaks. So you have a plan in advance and your teacher knows what it is that might be a different need for your child and how she can support that. Maggie, could you let Bridget Mann into the meeting, please? Whenever possible, if we can offer choice, that's empowering to people just in general. So you might ask your children or your students for a plan around what would make learning more fun. Maybe it's sitting on a yoga ball. Maybe that helps maintain some of the anxiety that's present for their little bodies. Maybe it's using some kind of fidget tool to help maintain their focus. All of that can be included in the preparation for that online learning space. And I think also it's important to talk to students and children about privileges. So when we successfully complete online learning time, that means that you have an opportunity to take a break and go outside. You can ride your bike, you can jump on the trampoline, you can play Minecraft, really play up to their interest, because that is going to motivate their successful completion of what's happening. So think about what they want from you and perhaps what their love language is, and play on that as well. I have a plan for hugs at my house, which may sound ridiculous to people who have a love language of affection, but that's not my love language. So every morning I hug my kids as soon as they get up, and then we hug whenever I have my lunch break from work, and we hug whenever I'm leaving the house. And so I have built in like 5 set hug times for my kids because they have a love language that includes affection. And guess what? It's going to be more so when they start back to school, because with more stress, we need more connection. So think about some simple ideas like that. So in this family meeting, you're going to talk about the plan and you're going to repeat the plan, and there's going to be a visual schedule of the plan because we want everybody to be on the same page. And if there's a reference and they can see it, they're less likely to interrupt what you are doing while you're working or doing other household things, and it keeps them on track. I also think it would be awesome if you had your teacher's email address, if there's Google office hours, that your child can be reminded of when they can connect with the teacher, maybe privately, and other people that are supports in the school. And Bridget's going to talk a little bit more about that aspect of the family meeting and supports identification within the school system. also remember that everyone likes to be celebrated, and a small success is a way of celebrating. So notice what's going right during the day and compliment your child for their hard work and their progress. We don't have to wait till they've achieved everything to say they're doing a great job, working hard, being curious, asking questions, paying attention. There's tons of things that they can be doing that you're observing that deserve praise. So think about that. And Bridget has joined us. She is going to talk a little bit more about the learning zone that we can create to produce optimal learning experiences and reduce the chaos that is perhaps at bay. Thank you, Bridget.
Good afternoon, everybody. First thing is that, we kind of reiterate some of the things that have been said, is that it's very important to kind of establish structure and establish the time as far as the instructional time frame that we'll be looking at. I know that within the school systems, they are putting out kind of the window of times that they're recommending for the virtual component. In addition, there are also things are being posted even as we speak today, as far as schedules, as far as here's a window of where a staff member would be accessible for having that conversation. But it is very important to kind of establish a time frame. As we know, most of us, whether we're a mom or a dad, have gone through life and realized that if we have a comfortable structure, that really children are seeking that. And you gotta make sure that it's great, that it's age appropriate. Focusing is going to be an important item to take in consideration. And what I would like to really kind of, sorry, I understand that my sound is a little off. So I hope this is better. We are having okay, thank you. So what's going to be important about that instructional time, particularly if we're talking about with the online learning, is really establishing a comfort zone, because virtual learning has fatiguing effects to our children, and being mindful to give them a break. I can tell you that today, myself as an adult, I have done several components of virtual learning, and sometimes I struggle with focusing. I struggle with having the aspect of maintaining a thought and being consistent with it. And you take that in consideration. I'm an adult. Let's now think about that in regards to a child, especially those that are even younger. So maintain what is an appropriate instructional time. In school, we know that when it comes to our younger children, having them sit for an extended amount of time, we need to give them breaks. We need to give them activities. We need to give them a change of pace, give them the time to interact. That's a way that allows them to have that, be able to kind of think, pair, share. So you have that ability to process information and then move on. And then what's very much more appropriate is for them to be then able to convey that in their own terms. As far as with reduction of distractions, that's going to be very important. It's very good for them to have an opportunity to encourage, for whether we're talking to our families or talking to a student, we want to make sure that we reinforce creating that work zone. If they have the supports of identifying a place where they can go and work on a daily basis, conveying information to as far as how to be best prepared, identifying the tools or the items that are appropriate for them. In other words, if they do need to have pencils and crayons, that's one thing. But if they need to have their Chromebook, having that in a secured spot, making sure that that's safe and it's contained, because think about it, on a daily basis when we prepare for work, we generally try to have those items already prepped and ready to go when we need to leave the door. So it's just making sure to establish for success. And then another thing I would also kind of keep in mind is that after they encouraging that when those instructional times are down, is to step away from the screen. Take a moment, encourage them for that physical activity to get away from the screen, because the eye fatigue is strong. Whether we're talking about for any individual, they just need to step away, have movement, have other activities that are in place that can help with that refocusing. And let's see, I think I've talked about, as far as, maintaining rules and supports, structure, it's always important. Have a target time for ending and wrapping up. And then also maybe in this situation is to encourage having a time frame for them to be able to follow back up on. And talk about one thing that needs to be said, because I know most of us are taking this from an aspect of being able to time for the student to be able to share out verbally to someone else. Now, if they are engaged virtually with other students, that's one thing. But think about the power of being able to take that time and share with another person, whether it's their sibling or a parent, but being able to share and articulate those words in place. Now, one of the things is that, for our families and our children, is knowing who to be able to reach out to. And one thing I'd like to make sure that everybody realizes that we have resources in the school system that are available. There are also resources in our community, but let's talk about for the school system. First thing is, and I strongly encourage, if you've not ever utilized the Family Resource Center, please be mindful that the Family Resource Center is kind of has a network of different individuals that they can reach out to. And if you have not ever utilized that component, consider, because they have networks with community resources if there are needs and concerns. If there's, ideally, let's think about mental health and physical awareness, not knowing how to pursue those avenues, you can take it through the Family Resource Center. They've been present all through the summer, all last spring, and even they are here starting with the beginning of this school year. Another component is that at each school we have school counselors, and they are there and they are connected with the resources in our community, as far as our mental health agencies such as Mountain Comp, but there are others. They also have networks with other resources, just like the Family Resource Centers. They may be able to connect with community services to help guide and fulfill those supports, whether we're talking about a particular student or their family. But also know, if you have the question, well, how do I reach these individuals? Well, every school has a number that's posted that can be Googled, or there's websites, but I would like to say probably the first start is go to the Clark County website. And from there, you can go through the link and you can hit every building. That will take you down to the phone numbers of contact for both the building and for the FRC, but also for identifying individuals, and they're being updated concurrently. And another thing, during all this, there's several questions that are going on in regards to virtual learning. Please be aware on the Clark County website, we are doing FAQs, and They are being maintained ongoingly to try to address to make sure that we have questions. But first and foremost, I do not encourage anybody to feel like they are on an island. Please be aware that you can always reach out. There are people here to help and guide. So one thing I would say too is kind of keep in mind, the best thing is to try to keep things simple. Try not to overdo anything in preparation, and just know that planning is important, scheduling is important, knowing the contacts that are available. And with that, I'm going to be quiet, and that way it can go back to Patricia or Maggie. And if you have questions, please feel free at some point to ask.
I'm gonna jump in here. My name's Maggie, and I'm a wellness expert. So my job is to help everybody think about their mental and emotional capacity and how to kind of create a life right now when everything's disruptive and challenging, where we're nourishing ourselves, we're taking good care of ourselves. And one of the things that I keep hearing from the clients that I work with is, I can't seem to get back to the way it was before in the way that I would take care of myself. And I think that it's kind of stalling everybody in some of our traditional ways that we would deploy self-care. So I think we need to change the way that we're thinking about our self-care right now. It's a lot more fluid. So before, where you might have work time and home time, and you kind of built your self-care around that routine, now we're all at home all the time. So last school year, I had my work schedule, my spouse's work schedule, my kids' school schedule, and then extracurriculars. And we would do the thing where we'd weave it all together and see where we could make time to pack some healthy lunches, or make time to, do our grocery shopping or get some exercise. And now we don't have those separations that we used to have between our work life and our home life. So I'm going to invite everybody to think about their self-care in a more fluid way, because all of these things are kind of meshed together. So let's start with one way to simplify just the information that we have to manage right now. So first thing is, my kids started school today online. I'm in Kentucky, and I'm in Northern Kentucky, and they, each of them have about 15 platforms in total with logins and passwords. And so I took some time on the front end to put all of that information in one place, so that when I'm in the middle of doing my work here with y'all, if they end up in a situation where they forgot the login, the password for the platform that their teacher's on, it's already printed out and it's in a place where they can easily find it. So these are the kinds of tips and tricks that I want you to start thinking about. How can you take all of this information that's coming at you and create some kind of grab and go items for yourself? The other thing I want you to think about is really around meals. So this picture of this snack bin is an actual picture of an actual snack bin that sits on my counter in my house, because my kids will ask me for a snack 52,000 times a day. Last year in the spring, I jokingly wrote a posted on the internet about parental support units, PSUs. And a parental support unit is every time that your child needs you, your student needs you in the middle of a day. And so when you're trying to do your own work at home or maintain your home or help support multiple students in your home, every time you have one of those parental support units, it takes away from your ability to do those other things. So I found that snacks were a high volume parental support unit. And basically, I created the snack bin. So there are 4 snacks in this bin. The rule is you can have one of each thing that's in that bin. And I already know that I filled it with healthy things, so I'm not worried about them grabbing one of those and going off with it. And that way they don't have to come and ask me about it. The second thing I want you to think about is lunches. I have heard several of my friends continuing to pack their kids' lunches so that way, even though we're all pausing for a lunch break, we're not having to go into the refrigerator and prepare something for lunch, where they were continuing that routine that they had to pack something in the morning for themselves and their kids. And that way, when it was lunchtime, everybody could go to the refrigerator and grab out their existing lunch. I do know if you traditionally received your lunches from school, many districts are working out ways in which they can continue to support that service for you. So that would be another thing to check in with the school district if you were on a lunch support program. And then the last thing is around dinners. You know, we don't have to be the best right now. We can all be okay-ish. And we don't need to make amazing meals. We do need to keep our kids healthy, and we need to keep ourselves healthy. So there are a lot of, prepared foods that we can buy. So I like to buy my veggies pre-cut just to save myself a little bit of time. So you think about rotisserie chickens and some of those healthier items that are already pre-made. See, I have a comment over. Okay, so we're talking about that. Okay, so activity times. I'm going to go over this one pretty quickly because we've already discussed it a fair bit. But we have got to move in the middle of the day. This is incredible. For every 60 minutes that we sit, we have an enzyme that helps us to metabolize fat in our body. And when we sit for 60 minutes and 1 hour, that enzyme drops significantly. So basically what I'm saying is when we sit for a long time, our body's like, oh, okay, I don't have to work that hard. I'm just gonna shut down a little bit. So the good news is that if we get up and move for just 3 minutes, it brings that enzyme production back up, kicks our metabolism back in gear, and we all want to have an amazing metabolism, right? We want our body to be high functioning and doing the work that it does in the background for us. So, really could think about lots of small breaks. I'm going to echo what Bridget said and say these should not be screen breaks, because we've got to get out of our heads when we're learning, and we've got to get into our bodies. And we're all spending more time on virtual worlds and screens than ever before. So just a few things to keep in mind around there. Your breaks can be, that are for kids, are equally as important for you. If you do need to have some go-to screen time, because as we know, sometimes we've got to get on a call ourselves and we need to be able to have the kids in a situation, maybe it's raining outside, maybe there's not a lot to do in the house. It's okay to give yourself some screen time for your kids if that's going to help you do the thing that you need to do. So make sure that you kind of have a list of some pre-approved videos and screen opportunities for your kids that you know are going to be safe for them. And that's another one where you're not being pulled away to manage, you know, mom, can I watch this? You know, all those things. Okay, so this one is actually a shout out to the person, I don't know if you guys have seen him, who actually has listened to this whole webinar while he was driving down the road. So he's doing this, what's on this, perfectly. We're doing a lot of multitasking right now. And what he did is in his time when he was driving, he was also on this webinar. So kudos to him. He also watched the road very well. So he did it very safely. But I want to invite you, when I talked about, you know, thinking a little bit more fluidly about how we get things done. Before, if I was at work, I would not be able to throw in a load of laundry or take the dog for a walk or, you know, vacuum. So now that I'm home, I can break up that work and I don't need to put it all in one giant pocket. So here's a list of things that can give you a mental break that don't have to result in completely just leaving everything else to pile up for later, right? Because we also actually need to have some time at the end of the day where we get to tune out from everything, where there's no more anything to get done, right? So it's okay in the middle of the day to make those breaks kind of task oriented. And you can see I've got a few things on here. Somebody mentioned in the first webinar that we did that paying a bill is not really very stress relieving, and you know, that's fair enough. We want you to do what makes sense for you that doesn't overload you. So this is not meant to be you know, keeping you constantly going. It's meant to give you an opportunity to shift from one way of being present in the world, which is watching a screen, using a lot of brain power, to shifting into something that's going to give your brain a break and allow you to be inside your body and get some movement and take care of some things. Okay, so again, I'm going to echo what Bridget said, and Patricia also said this. This is a time when it's just really challenging. There's a lot coming at us, and I have absolutely had moments where I needed to reach out for connection. So I'm a verbal processor myself, so I know that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need to reach out and I need to call somebody, even though sometimes I might feel like I just want to go into isolation. So I had somebody who said, you know, I always know that when I'm getting stressed, I tend to self-isolate, when in reality, if I connect with somebody, it will help me a lot more. And so Patricia, when I was talking to her about this example, called this the opposite action. So when we're starting to feel out of control and overwhelmed, we want to think about taking a small opportunity to feel in control of something. For me, that's picking up the little stuff that my kids leave all over the house throughout the day. And somebody wrote in the questions, do you have a suggestion for how to do all of this and have a full-time job? This is one of the greatest impacts on our well-being right now. So Patricia started this webinar out by saying, you know, don't let perfect get in the way of good enough. It's okay to operate in a way that allows us to get some things done, but we are not going to keep up the level of expectation that we had pre-pandemic, okay? I'm actually a workplace wellness consultant, and so, you know, talking to your manager about how you might be able to do your work at different times can be an option. I know employers are being really flexible about that. And I do know that the government passed some protections for employers right now, or for employees right now. And there are options for you to be able to take advantage of if you need to be home with your kids. So I just want to acknowledge that this is incredibly difficult. So the point of this webinar is to say a lot of us right now are working full-time jobs, are being the part of the educational team for our children, and that's what this webinar is supposed to help with. I did a lot of planning the last week, and it was overwhelming and it was hard. But this week, today being our first day of school, things went a lot more smoothly because I took some time in the evenings to really gather all the information that my district had provided, to pull those passwords and logins together, to ensure that I had connected with the teachers for my children. So that planning the past 2 weeks really helped me this week and will continue to help me. And as Patricia mentioned in the comments, the Family Resource Center is going to be a huge help for you if you need help. And the truth is that this is really hard. And actually, this next slide kind of really goes towards that. We've got to manage our own mental and emotional load right now. So, you know, sometimes you'll see something on Facebook that's like, have your kids help with the chores. And some days that is exactly what we need, is to invite other people to participate and support us in this effort right now. Other times that can bring with it its own mental and emotional load. So getting grandparents to help or getting kids to help sometimes comes with more work than help. So it's okay sometimes to go like, this one, I'm like, tonight, I'm going to take care of these things myself because I just don't have it in me to do the interpersonal relationship thing with the kids and the grandparents and everyone else, right? So there's no perfect answer for all the time. You're going to make the best decision for yourself that day that works for you. And if you need to let your kids be on some screens and give yourself a break and call a good friend and say, I'm not doing well, I need just a connection, that's totally okay. Someone said, I am the grandparent raising 2 kids full-time job in rural Harrison County with no internet. I see you and I hear you, and Patricia and the school board, they are working so hard, the school districts, to meet your needs and be here for you. And that's why they've put these things together, is so that they could make sure that you knew that they were here for you. And there will be a list of resources that are going to come out for you. That's really hard, and I'm sorry that you're in that situation. But I'm also grateful that there are people like you doing this work for those 2 kids. Okay, I'm going to pass this back to Patricia. She's going to talk about the other resources that are going to be available to you.
Thank you, Maggie. I think it's one of the main points today that you deserve connection to support your family's experience with online learning. And I'm not sure if I said this at the beginning of this webinar or the one earlier today, but I have been emailed, texted, called by teachers from a variety of districts saying, don't forget to tell parents, don't forget to tell grandparents that we're here to help. I think in the spring, teachers were not prepared to do this emergency online learning thing, because why would they be, right? And now they have spent time since that time preparing for this. And there are tools that we may not be aware of at this point that are going to be launched to support learning at home. And the plan is for it to be very different from the spring. And it's so important that we ask for help and show our children that that is a healthy, responsible choice, right? And I will even model for my kids in front of them if something's happening in the Zoom meeting, etc. I will say, I don't know what's happening with this. I'm going to ask a question, and I will get in the chat box and I will identify who I need to communicate with privately, ask the question. So you can do the same thing. You can allow them to observe you doing what you need to do to get connection and help. And that's healthy. That's how we get through this world, especially during times such as these, right? So I just want to remind you, we talked a lot about routine and consistency and predictability today. That's because as human beings, we feel safe when those things are in place. And during a time of a pandemic, we need to hold on to that experience of security and safety. So we're trying to promote that by having a plan in place for children and online learning with a variety of barriers that may be present in your individual home. And part of creating safety for our kids is creating space for our own safety. So how can you create some routine, consistency, and predictability for students or for your children so that you're better able to respond to them when they are in need, right? It's going to be a situation where you have to make a choice at times between answering your work call or answering your child. And that's unfortunate. And that's why it's important to offer yourself compassion and grace and to communicate about your needs, not only with your teacher or other school support, but with your employer. And perhaps there can be some flexibility around that. I know that's not always the case, and it's okay to ask, right? That's how we get connected and obtain the resources necessary to make this easier for everyone. So how can you add self-care as part of your routine? I don't know. I don't know the answer for each of you individually. I do know it's important because we all experience stress in different ways. Our self-care is going to look different, right? So Maggie said maybe paying a bill would feel good because she then doesn't have to worry about it as, you know, the 11th thing on her to-do list. When I feel out of control, sometimes doing something from start to finish that's observably achieved feels good. Like I shine the stainless steel on my appliances. I don't even like cleaning, but that feels good during a pandemic because I can control that. So think about what you can do. Perhaps it's on your to-do list. Perhaps it's the furthest thing from what's on your to-do list. Maybe it's just taking a walk. Maybe it's taking a nap, taking a shower. There are a lot of resources that you can use that are free. And I think they all require some planning and intention and maybe goal setting. And that's going to support your wellness during this time. And it's also going to be a great model for the students that are in your home because you are teaching them and modeling for them the importance of compassion and grace and taking care of ourselves both mentally and physically. So I challenge you to figure out 3 things that you can do this week that promote self-care and also to play on purpose. Have fun on purpose with your children. Just because we're turning into school doesn't mean we are leaving fun behind, and that builds connection that will help us during times of stress and online learning. So I'd like to open the floor and the chat box for questions. What other questions have come up while we have been discussing online learning?
I know that I have seen in the chat that there may be some individuals that are struggling with getting some guidance on what to do in circumstances, I'm gonna reiterate it. I know that I would say contact the school in which your children are enrolled in. But I would also say that if for some reason you are struggling with getting contact via the school, most FRCs have their own line. I would encourage you to do that, the Family Youth Service Centers. And if you're not able to connect with someone there, there is always the Board of Education. So, you know, I would encourage anybody, and I realize that there are individuals that may not be from Clark County or have children from the Clark County school system and may have children in other districts, but I know that there would be avenues out there to help you in getting information on the what to and the next steps. So I would just encourage, it's going to be very important that you not become an island, that you reach out and identify to get the answers that you need, because that's very important. That will help you and your stress. That will help your children and their stress. And whether we're talking about them having access virtually, or if they're taking a more standard paper pencil approach to doing instruction, there are avenues out there for that support.
Thank you, Bridget. I have the opportunity to reply to questions by email. If more questions come up for you, I'm happy to connect with you on that. I'll put my email address directly in the chat window. I do communicate and support several different school districts that Mountain Comp serves across Central Kentucky. And I think Bridget's exactly right. There is someone in the school district that can help you answer questions. And starting with the school counselor is a great idea. Connecting with any special education case manager, perhaps, would be another avenue of support, and your FRC. So if you don't get the help the first time, ask a second time and a third time. I wouldn't be surprised if that first call really results in exactly what you need, or at least connects you to the person that can answer the question at hand. So I don't see any other questions in the chat box. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for taking this time for your children and for yourself to absorb some things and have a better picture about how you're going to embark on this online learning opportunity. And I challenge you again to make that plan for self-care that we talked about. That may include asking for help. That's one of three. That's a great start. God bless and be well.